We're going to start with our welcome practice. And our welcome practice is going to be a mindfulness practice. If you were here before, in the last session, you'll know more or less what we have planned. But if you're not familiar with mindfulness, not to worry, it's just follow along as best as you can. So if you're moving around, what I invite you to do is to just pause where you are. You might be standing, you might be sitting. It's totally okay to take 2 minutes just to be still. So just let your body fall still. Feel your feet. Let them be grounded. Flat on the floor if you can. You can even close your eyes if you want to, or you can keep them open. You might notice that there's a lot going on in the body. There might be a lot going on in the mind. That's okay. We're just going to notice what's here. Being curious and open and gentle with ourselves. Just acknowledging all that the body, the heart, and the mind is holding right now. And if you'd like to, you can anchor your attention now in the sensation in your feet. Or if it's more useful, you can bring your attention to your breath and just notice your breath. Inhaling through the nose, exhaling through the mouth. And just softening your belly a little bit. And just the only thing here is this moment and this breath. Just in this moment, there is nothing to solve, nothing to do, nothing to achieve. Just being here, just this. And now just allowing an intention to arise. So you might be noticing something. There might be a desire coming up for you as you fall still. You might be noticing something that's not wanted or something that's wanted. So whatever that is for you, just taking a mental note, or you can write it down if you have a piece of paper. What's your intention? And it could be an intention for today. It could be an intention around doing something like this more often. And if you'd like to share what's showing up for you as we transition back, allowing your eyes to open, wiggling your fingers and your toes, and just share briefly, what's on your heart now that we've really entered this space together. So again, you can type in the chat or you can unmute yourself and speak. So the question is, what was that like? Or just what's on your heart or your mind right now?
Hi, I'm Lori. Thank you, Neely. I don't usually start my sessions like this, but my intent is to do it. It really makes a difference. I use mindfulness in my therapy. However, I never begin a session like this, and I think it'll be helpful. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we are going to continue. So I run an organization called Aham Education. Aham is a Sanskrit word. It means I am. And it's also a nifty acronym. The Art of Happiness and Mindfulness and the Academy of the Heart and Mind. So that's really what we do. We really provide tools to help folks connect and to use their heart, mind, body tools to be able to cultivate resilience empathy, compassion, really just to live healthier, happier lives. And so most of the tools we provide are either mindfulness based or mind body based. And so I'd like to spend a moment just going through what we covered last time as a reminder for those who were there, and as a just as a sneak peek for those who weren't there. So we described what mindfulness is. We came up with a definition, which is really paraphrasing of John Kabat-Zinn's definition, which is the awareness that arises naturally from paying attention in the present moment, on purpose, non-judgmentally, and with an open, curious heart and mind. And then what I shared was there are 3 ways to make sure that we're thinking or experiencing mindfulness. If we're not sure, there's an intention. So at the beginning, I invited you to be explicit about what your intention was. So your intention is, who and how am I showing up in this moment? It's making a conscious choice about who I am and how I am in this moment. The attention is the way we're directing that amazing quality of the mind to use to be attentive through our senses. So we pay attention with the mind, but the mind needs a body to pay attention, because without our 5 senses, we can't pay attention. So the attention is the mind, and it's also the 5 senses. The attitude is what's in the heart space. So there are 3 different words, but they're really part of the same heart-mind quality. They all kind of organically work together. So the attitude that I invited when we did the practice just now was to be open, to be curious, to be kind to yourself, to be non-judgmental. Those are mindfulness attitudes. And so what we also covered was, we talked a little bit about what is a parent and what is a child. Like, what is the essence of a parent? And we came up with some verbs, right? Nurturing, caring, guiding. And we also came up with the etymology of the word parent is to bring forth, right? It's not to drag forth or to push forth, it's to bring forth. And this idea of guiding by the side. We also talked about, you know, this poem by Kahlil Gibran. So if you missed it, if you just Google Kahlil Gibran children, this will come up all over the internet. And we reflected on this, and we had an opportunity to really think about, how are we embodying these qualities? Are we striving to be like them? Are we guiding? Are we just allowing them to fly and to be free? Are we providing that stability? Are we clear that, first of all, do we believe this, right? They come through you, but not from you. And though they are with you, yet they belong not to you. You may give them your love, but not your thoughts. We spent a lot of time talking about that. So I invite you, and I will share this poem in the chat, because I'm being a little bit like, because I really love this poem, and every time I read it, I mean, it's always a wake-up call, because I'm always, first of all, I always believe that they belong to me. And I have to remind myself that they are their own human beings, whole and complete already the way they are. They don't need fixing. And that's a tough one for me to remember and to live by, right? And so we spent a lot of time reflecting on that, and we had some really beautiful input. And then we talked about, well, what is a mindful parent? And this is a kind of a summary of some different work that's out there, but it's sort of my sort of experiment with this. I've been practicing mindfulness since I was 11 or 12 years old. I went to mindfulness and meditation school in addition to regular school. My parents were very interesting people. And so I had a lot of exposure to this growing up, just as a part of my lifestyle. And then I studied something completely different in school, prepared myself to work as a translator, and I was going to be part of the UN, and I did some of that work for, you know, not in the UN, but I worked in that world for a little while. And then I transitioned to doing this, which is teaching mindfulness and teaching these tools, because I realized that if I could give my child one thing, if I were to die tomorrow, it wouldn't be more money. It wouldn't even be the best education, like the best school, right? It would be giving them, empowering them, giving them tools that would help them to understand how to live in the present and how to use their inner resources, because from there you can find everything else that you need. So I made the decision in that moment. I was living in Mexico. My son was born a preemie. I had to make the decision whether I was going to hire a nurse and stay there, or leave. And then we left. And we came back to Florida with nothing. And I made the decision then, and I completely shifted my career, because I realized that I needed to do something else with my life. And it was because of that thought. Because when I was having my son, there was a 50-50 chance that either he would die or I would die, because he was a 26-week baby. And so I realized that would be the one thing that I would want to give him before I left. And so this program of mindful parenting is really special to me, because it's kind of how I started this journey into just putting myself out there to share these practices with others, and to continue to practice alongside others, and to be of service, but also to continue to be a student, right? Because we never really get perfect at this, right? So the 5 pieces that we shared were unconditional love, holding spacious presence, giving them space to be themselves, being fully present with them, recognizing we are imperfect, and to maybe, normalize some of that imperfection, and not try to, like, if the dishes aren't done, like, that's okay. What's the most important thing? The most important thing is the most important thing. Everything else can wait. And sometimes we pressure ourselves to have it all picture perfect. And trust me, nobody I know really has it picture perfect. Model by example. So anything we want to see in them, we model that. Not because we're showing them, but because we're also working on ourselves to be better. And then conscious discipline is about balancing that love and discipline, setting clear boundaries and following up, but coming from a place of not fear, anxiety, or stress, coming from a place of love and understanding that boundaries, and we're going to get more into that in session 4, that boundaries, they want those boundaries. That is what helps them to feel safe and loved, and which is very different to imposing control. It's not the same thing. So that's pretty much what we covered in the first session. And I'd like to open up the floor for those of you, and this was the home practice, right? So those of you that were in the previous session, and I'm not sure who was, but if you were, if you could raise your hand, or if you could just share, or maybe you are exposed to mindfulness and you practice during the week. If you could just give an example of what you practiced and how it went for you. What I will do is I will share an example. So I was with I don't know what I was doing. I was probably working at my computer, and my son came downstairs and he was talking to me. They just start talking. They don't say, excuse me, they just interrupt, right? And so he was asking me something, and to me, it seemed like compared to what I was doing. So I was kind of being dismissive of him. And it occurred to me in that moment that he was just seeking connection, that he was bringing up this ridiculous whatever he looked at on TikTok or something that I wasn't interested in. But that was his way of getting my attention. And in that moment, I noticed the sort of anxiety I was feeling because I was interrupted. And I decided to just pause and take a breath and remember that the most important thing is the most important thing. And in that moment, he was the most important thing, not what I was working on that I could get back to at any time. And in that mindful breath that I took, and I know it seems kind of, well, you know, does that really work? And it really does. Because in that moment, I noticed that the anxiety that I was feeling started to settle, and that it became really clear that it was okay for me to leave the computer and just turn to him and have a silly conversation, because that's what he needed in that moment to feel connected to me. And that, by the way, is what helps in my relationship with him to have open communication on other things that might be going on with him as a teenager, right? We all know that those little, you know, sort of small talk is really the beginning of deeper conversations, right? So that's how I practice this week. Does anybody else have an example, even if you weren't in the session last week, but an example like that of where you kind of woke up to, you know, being in a reactive mode or being in a autopilot mode, and you were able to just be present with your child? Anybody else have an example?
Hi. Um, well, with me, I guess with me, yeah, I think trying not to be reactive with kids, sometimes it's really hard. And when I'm working with kids, I notice that I need to do a lot of breathing sometimes. Now that I'm from home, I have all my aromatherapy here, but in my office, I would breathe with them just so I can calm myself down, even though they thought it was for them. But it just helps to kind of, it's almost your way of checking yourself to make sure that what you're going to say is going to be for the kid and not for you, you know, and it's hard, especially now working from home and technology not always working well, and you know, just millions of pressures that you get that are job related. You know, it's, you need to keep yourself grounded. So for me, yeah, a lot of being mindful of that, and a lot of breathing helps. The breathing kind of stops you from being reactive.
Yeah, it allows that space. Thank you for sharing that. It's kind of like Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom to choose a response. And it's so powerful because we really do experience freedom. Yeah. And so that pause that we did at the beginning is an example of that. And you can do that for 30 seconds or for 10 minutes and really see what the impact is. Today, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what happens in the brain. Now, I know some of you here don't have young children and you can't relate in this point in time in your life to an example, the example that I shared. However, we also talked about last week that a parent is not just a parent of a child. You might be taking care of siblings or of parents. Whoever you're caring for, this applies. Or you might remember an example of interacting with other people in your family, whether they're your nieces or nephews or children of friends, or maybe your own children when they lived with you. So please feel free to find the way that this is relevant to you so that everyone is included and you all have a voice and a way to relate to this information, because ultimately we're always guiding somebody, right? There's always, even if it's a friend, there's always someone we're guiding. So you can also think of this, the content of this training in that way. So I'm going to share mine. Does anybody else have an example they'd like to share before we move?
I just have a comment that I wanted to make. You know, my son's 27 now. I've been practicing mindfulness for about, I'd say maybe 18 years.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that occurred to me when I first started practicing mindfulness, especially as a parent, the mindful parent, is that I brought this child into the world. It's my responsibility. And even more important, I'm not going to bring him up the way that I was brought up, because I was brought up where, you know, do what I say, do as I say, not as I do. Our children are so important. We bring them into this world. It's important for us to be good listeners and to take that time, to that pause in between, you know, what we're doing and the reaction or the response. They deserve that. So I just, you know, that's a whole different way of thinking of children, is they deserve, and that their life doesn't work around my life. My life was worked around him as a young child. And that's a very different way of thinking. I don't know how you feel about that, but that was a big reason why I chose to practice mindfulness. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. What comes to mind as you share that is that there's a lot of conditioning as we go through this kind of this approach. There's a lot of conditioning that we realize, to your point about do as I say, not as I do, that we begin to notice that maybe in our heads we know we don't believe it, but when we become parents or when we're in a situation with a loved one, somehow those automatic patterns come up and it's hard to get rid of them. And so a lot of what mindfulness can help with is to first see those conditioned patterns of thinking and being clearly, catch them. Sometimes we don't catch them. Sometimes they take over and we react. And today we're going to be talking about that. But to really see them in the moment for what they are. And if there's a space to choose a different response or to think in a different way, we can do that. But without the awareness, we spend most of our time just moving in autopilot. We talked about last week, or being in monkey mind mode, just going from one thing to the next. And so when we are not present, the conditioned responses from our upbringing, whatever went in, whether we were conscious of it or not, is what governs our behavior. And so this is why being present is so important, because it allows us, as I mentioned in the quote before, it allows us to create a space between stimulus and response. And that space is where we begin to have the opportunity to choose a different thought, to choose a different way to handle a situation, choose a different behavior, to even notice our emotions and to give it a little bit of space so that we don't react from that emotional space, right? There's so much that becomes available that doesn't feel available when we're just in a reactive mode. So thank you for sharing that. So I would like to, there's something in the chat. That's okay, Anna. Thank you for joining us. Anna, is there anything you want to share about the practice from last week? Anything that you were able to try out that you want to share with us? Because I know you were here last week.
To be honest with you,
Yes.
you know, I don't think I practiced anything. I'm going to be completely honest. I'm going to be honest with you. I think I forgot to practice.
So what was it?
I was not a good student. I mean,
you're a great student because you came back. So I
came back and I was late.
That's okay. Did you think about it at all?
Yes, I did. I really enjoyed it. And everything has been sinking in, and I've been listening, but I didn't practice. No, I didn't. I have to be honest with you.
What was it like not to practice?
I forgot to do it.
Uh-huh.
So I can't tell you what it was like because I just forgot about it. I forgot about it.
Right. And
because I should have set an intention to do it. You know, I should have written it down. Maybe do what you do, put Post-its all over the house or something.
Yeah. So that's why reflecting on not practicing is helpful, because it helps us to see what we can do differently next time.
Yes.
And get back on the horse, no judgment. Okay.
Yes. That's what it is, you know, and with all the craziness of the, you know, doing the e-learning at home and everything else, I forgot about it. It just, now that you're asking me, I'm like, oh, that's right. I was supposed to do something.
Yeah. And there's no supposed to, this is for you. So just pick a time in your day when, like, it could be as soon as you wake up, before launching into the shower or the bathroom or into the kitchen or whatever you do. Take a minute, just a minute, sit on the edge of your bed and just breathe.
Yes.
Just do that for you. So if you just do that and you pick the same time every day, what happens is that what we know about the science of habit formation is that if we do the same thing every day at the same time, then it's more likely that it'll stick. So, but do it for like a minute, because if it's more than a minute, you might decide not to do it because it might feel like it's taken too much time. But if you do it for a minute, then what happens is that your perception of time gets a little bit more expansive, and you might do it for 3 or 5, depending on the day. So see how that goes. No judgment. If you forget again, guess what? Tomorrow's a new day.
Okay. Thank you.
For sharing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So we're just gonna review our set. I was actually doing a recap, Anna, so you didn't miss much.
Okay, thank you.
Because you were here last week. So our intentions for today are to deepen our understanding of how mindful awareness practices, they're called MAPs, right? So every time I say MAPs, you know I'm referring to mindful awareness practices, how they can build resiliency in the family, we're gonna unpack a little bit our own stress reactivity. I'm gonna attempt to put you in some groups to talk to each other. So I hope that when that comes around, that people are able to unmute themselves and have a conversation with each other. So I'll take a little poll when that time comes around, and we'll decide whether we do it that way or with the whole group. And then we're going to just kind of explore what are some of the mindful awareness practices we can practice this week at home, okay? That helps us to deal with that reactivity. So there's an image on the screen. So if you're not looking at the screen, I invite you to look at the screen right now and just look at that image. I don't have a baby and a toddler, but that's how I feel like still. So if you relate to that image in any way, maybe in the past or maybe currently, just give me a thumbs up. So how many of you have ever, when you're feeling this way especially, right? How many of you have ever said or done something that you later regretted? That's a trick question. It's happened to all of us, right? And so what I'm getting at is that there are always moments when we are either in that autopilot mode that we looked at last week, or we're in this mode where there's too much going on and our minds can't fully pay attention to one thing or the other. We're overwhelmed or we're stressed. And then we say or do something that we really didn't intend, but we all know intention is an impact, right? And then we wish we could just suck it back up and undo it. And so I want you to think about in that moment, right? What's happening in your brain is that so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and I'll show my hand. I'm gonna show you a video of the hand model of the brain in a moment with someone who is much more articulate in explaining this. But in your brain, so if my hand is my brain, right? This is the front part where my forehead is, right here. And this here in the center is the hippocampus and the amygdala, that's the emotion. And we'll just call that the emotional brain, right? That image that was on the screen, that mom multitasking, going nuts. When we're in that mode, our emotion center is activated. And our thinking brain, which is this front part here, where the prefrontal cortex is, which is responsible for thinking, focusing, and all the stuff that we want, right? Being resilient, having empathy, being able to prioritize, being able to pause and respond, all of that goes offline. And we're in our downstairs brain. We're in that emotional brain. And I want you to think about when you're in that state, we call it flipping your lid. So when you're flipping your lid, right? What are some of the signs in your body that tells you you're flipping your lid? So I'll give you an example. For me, the example that I gave when my son interrupted me with some stupid TikTok joke, And then later on, I caught myself and I, repaired the situation. In that moment, and it was a small thing, I was flipping my lid, right? So in my body, I felt anxious and I felt it like in my throat. I started to feel like tight and like it was starting to like tighten up. I could feel it in my chest. And in my mind, the thoughts that were going through was, he's interrupting me. I got to get this done. This is so silly. Why is he looking at that stupid TikTok? Why are kids online so much? I need to take his phone away. Like all of this is going on in my head. So that's my thoughts. Physically, I'm feeling this sensation in my throat and my chest. Emotionally, I'm experiencing a little bit of frustration, a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of annoyance, and a little bit of helplessness and like a lack of control and like I'm overwhelmed, right? And so that's what I'm experiencing. And then what is my reactive pattern? My initial reactive pattern, the pattern that I have when I'm not thinking clearly, when I'm not mindful, is stop bothering me, is to say something. For some of us, it might be, just waving your hand to wave them away. Or for some of us, it might be, we don't say anything, but we start to cry. I don't know, right? We all have different ways that we react. They're different behaviors. They're different things we think and feel. When we'll call that our moments of reactivity when we're flipping our lid. So I want you to think about a situation when you were flipping your lid recently, maybe today, maybe just now, maybe it's happening as we speak, and think about what does your reactivity look like? So when I say what does your reactivity look like, thinking of the anatomy of stress. Now just remember that this is normal. Our bodies were designed, to experience reactivity, all right? Because it's part of our nervous system. So all of the symptoms I described that I was experiencing is a normal physiological, mental, emotional response that we sometimes call fight, flight, or freeze, that our body, it's a way for our system to let us know that we're in danger or there is a perceived threat. So it doesn't have to be an actual threat. It's just a perceived threat. And this happens. So there's nothing wrong with experiencing reactivity. It's a survival mechanism. The issue is that my son interrupting me is not the same as being in an accident. It's not the same as getting chased by a tiger, but I experienced that in the same way. And so the challenge is that if we're not aware and if we're, just reacting based on our conditioned responses, then what can happen is that we can do things that then we later regret. And so the value of mindfulness, of practicing mindfulness every day, the same way you go to the gym. So if you're exercising, you're spending time to do physical exercise, then think of this as heart-mind exercise. Your exercise routine is incomplete if you're not doing some kind of reflective, contemplative, awareness exercise, because all of the brain science and all of the science around our nervous system tells us that we need this daily practice so that in those moments when we would typically be reactive, we're able to bring our thinking brain back online faster, quicker, and for longer periods of time. Why? Because when we practice mindfulness, it actually stimulates that region of the brain. It actually increases the density of gray matter in our brain, which govern our capacity to be able to recover from a threat and hence be more resilient over time. And so this is not just about, oh, I'm going to take a brain break and be calm. This is actually about making a lifestyle change slowly over time so that it becomes part of how I take care of myself, so that in those moments that matter, I'm able to show up for myself and show up for the people around me. I want you to kind of what I shared, within the vicinity of that. So want you to think about your reactive situation. Don't go too much into the story. Just really get straight to the point. What happened? What was I thinking? What was I feeling in my body physically, the sensations? What emotions were present? And then how did I react? So if you were sharing in the middle of that, continue your thought. You could either continue your thought or you could share how it feels, how it felt too, because that's also an example of what we're describing. That's actually a live example of what we're describing, right? So who didn't get to finish their thought? And go ahead, go for it.
Sorry, I think I was in the midst of sharing. I think I was sharing that I actually ended up yelling at my son, right, for keeping things last minute for school. And I have a pet peeve. I don't like to repeat myself multiple times, but then I was sharing with the group that I have to remind myself that children need consistency, right? And then I had to kind of be like, okay, let me kind of walk away so I don't say something that I'm going to regret, and I have to also remember that he has a tendency to shut down when I do raise my voice, and then nothing gets done anyway, because he didn't hear a word of what I said. And I have to go back and apologize to him and say, hey, I'm sorry I yelled at you, and then still have him understand that I still stand by what I say, and why he needs to follow the rules, or why he needs to do X, Y, and Z. But I was also sharing that in the midst of all that, the frustration is, I was sharing that I'm also a student. I'm getting my master's, plus I have work, full-time job, and then there's him in school at home, and then I have homework, and I have an internship, and then I take care of my mom, and then there's a dog and a cat that kind of bugs me every now and then. So it's the frustration that comes with it. To me, I guess I'm a type of person where if something is avoidable, I try to teach my children, if it's avoidable, don't let it happen. But then it always happened this way. So I guess that's what I was going to share with everybody. I'm right here.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Yeah, so you touched on something that's really important to be aware of, which is, there are all kinds of stressors in our lives, right? The external stressors and the internal stressors. Internal stressors are like maybe if we have an illness, or if there's a pattern of either behavior or like maybe, mental or physical illness or disability that prevents us, then that could be stressful for us. If we have insomnia, that kind of thing. External is the stuff happening that we can't control outside of us. Some of the internal ones, it's hard to control as well, right? And some of the external stressors are very big, right? Like we call them acute stressors. So big life events like moving, COVID, racism, right? Especially if you're a person of color. If you're a person of color, it's both an acute and a chronic stressor, because you're facing it all the time. It's in every situation you're in. And many times we don't acknowledge that. It could be a death in the family. It could be divorce. So there are big things that happen that can be stressful. And then there's the everyday stuff that could be mundane, or they could be serious, but think of these as like little things, like they drip on you, right? So if we were able to be driving out in the world right now, traffic, that's a chronic stressor. That's every day, right? Especially if that kind of thing bothers you. Finances. What are some other chronic stressors you're dealing with every day? Share some examples. You can share it in the chat, or you can just speak it out. Mikhail mentioned doing a master's degree, deadlines. For me, it's too much on my plate. Cooking, mother-in-laws, children, husbands, spouses. Yeah, so multitasking. chores in the house. So the events in our lives, the events are actually, unless they're done with malice, they're actually neutral. Like the traffic is just, it just is. The financial situation is what it is. But it's the meaning and the relationship that we have to that stressor that produces the anxiety or the reactivity, right? So, and then what happens is our nervous system, our sympathetic nervous system gets activated, and we start to experience all the things we describe. I start to yell, my palms get sweaty if I'm about to take a test, right? In the case of our children, they're experiencing this too, right? And so the reason why these sessions are so focused on us is because our children are also humans. So once we notice it in ourselves, it's so much easier to relate to what's happening with them. And notice their stressors and notice how they are experiencing reactivity, how they are reacting when they're flipping their lid. That may or may not be within their control, like sitting all day in virtual school or being without friends or just needing to take a break, because sitting all day is just not normal, especially when you're a kid. So all of this can be really stressful to think about. Talking about stress can be stressful and sometimes can feel like there is no way out. However, at the beginning of the session, we did a practice, and many of you said it was nice to stop and take a pause. So the practice, the main practice that's new this week that I'd like to introduce is a mindfulness practice. This is not the same as doing your daily practice. So Anna, this is not take the place of sitting at the edge of your bed every morning for a minute or two. That's your daily, that's your brush your teeth every day practice. The stop practice is like going to the dentist. You do it when you need to. If you have a cavity or if you have a toothache, you use something, right? So the stop practice is for these moments of reactivity. Now, what will allow us to remember to do this, because we all know these things, but do we remember? And the reason why we may not remember is because we haven't trained our brain enough to be present. So when by doing the daily practice, we can train our brain to be more present more of the time. So STOP stands for stop in your tracks when you notice you're in fight or flight mode. And how do you know that? You've all identified it. You all talked about it. My heart was racing. I felt annoyed. I knew I was flipping my lid. So once you get a signal that that's happening, just stop in your tracks. Take a few breaths. I recommend soft belly breaths. So soft belly breaths means that when you breathe in, you let all of the air expand in your belly. You soften your belly. And then when you breathe out through your mouth, and you just let your stomach get small and just let it contract all the way in. And you do a few of those gently and with a soft belly, so not tense. The reason why I recommend soft belly breathing is because it stimulates what's called the vagus nerve, which is connected all the way from the bottom of your abdomen all the way up to the back of your brain. And it helps to stimulate a relaxation response. Maybe not right away, but it can. So you take a few soft belly breaths with awareness. With awareness means also observing your outer and your inner landscape. What am I feeling? I'm pissed off. My heart is racing. I feel overwhelmed. I feel unappreciated. I do too much. Nobody cares about me. I need to start thinking about myself. What's going on with my kids? How are we going to get through this pandemic? Like all of the, whatever's there, just bringing that kind, curious attention that we practiced in the beginning, that same quality of attention to whatever is there without judgment, without trying to push it away, without trying to fix it, just giving it space to exist because it's here. And then when you notice that you're starting to de-escalate or that you're starting to recover, and we know when that's happening, we start to feel a little bit more calm, our shoulders are not so tense, we're able to think a little bit clearly, then P, proceed with kindness when you're ready. All right, so this is a lifesaver. It's pretty much the example I gave when I was talking about my son interrupting me to talk about some TikTok video. I did the stop practice. I didn't use those words, but that's essentially what I did. And then I was able, so my version of proceed with kindness was to just stop and listen to him fully, give him my full attention. And so I'm going to share a video now by Dr. Dan Siegel, who's one of my favorite neurologists, and he talks a little bit about mindfulness and the brain. So he's going to explain a little bit better what I've already explained to you. And he's going to talk about how it impacts the brains of our children.
And the hand model of the brain that I use to teach parents is very useful to understand that. So if you take your thumb and put it in the middle of your palm, put your fingers over the top, this is a very useful model of the brain. And when we can actually see in front of us what's going on in the brain, then we can change what the brain does. So let me walk you through very basically what happens in this brain and the structures in it. And it goes like this. The spinal cord comes up representing the wrist, and then you have coming up into the skull, the brain stem and the limbic area, which work together to help regulate arousal and your emotions and the way you have a fight, flight, freeze response. These are below the cortex, the limbic and brainstem areas, and the cortex is this higher part of the brain that allows us to perceive the outside world, to think and reason. And this frontmost part of the brain, right behind your forehead, so the person's oriented like this, is actually the part that regulates the subcortical, limbic, and brainstem areas. This regulation is very important because sometimes we can have all sorts of things happen in our life. We're tired, we're exhausted, someone pushes a particular emotional button, and we can flip our lids. So rather than being tuned in and connected and balanced and flexible, we can lose all of that flexibility, even lose moral reasoning, and act in ways that are terrifying to others, including our children. Now, you can actually bring yourself back online and come back to the high road and make a repair with your child, and that's important to explain to them. And you can also use this hand model of the brain to explain to children, even as young as 5 and 6, how to understand when their emotions are rising up from the brainstem and limbic areas here, and how it's overriding the prefrontal area and making it so they may be about to flip their lids. So I've had kids come tell me that they're about to go flip their lids and they need a break. They need a timeout. And by even just naming that, they can tame it. And that's the power of using the hand model for ourselves and our children to help us all make sense of what goes on in the emotional communication that we have in the course of day-to-day life.
So what strikes you upon looking at that video? I know we've talked about some of that already, but he did add some pieces in that we didn't talk about.
Again, I'm Lori. First of all, I want to say that the stop practice, I love the idea that you use the word practice, because that's exactly what it is. And, you know, although I've been practicing mindfulness all these years, like there's so much here that's reminding me of things that I haven't been using, because it's a constant practice. If I don't practice every day, which I don't have that opportunity all the time, I go back to old ways sometimes. But I like the idea, and I hope you'll put it in the chat, that link that I could refer back to. I like the way he explains it, not only for me because I'm a visual person, but I'm going to use that to show my clients' parents that vision, that whole thing, so they can use that for themselves and their children, to teach their children. So it's a good visual. That's what I'm trying to say. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. I think it's nice to hear your perspective, because it allows us to have some self-compassion for ourselves, even if we have been using these practices. Because I can tell you, Same for me, you know, we continue to learn, and we don't need new information to keep learning. Sometimes it's seeing the same information again and again and again, because it just lands with us in a different way because we're in a different part of our lives, or we just haven't mastered that skill yet, and that's okay. So I appreciate you sharing that.
And also, just one other thing is
Go
that
ahead.
it's for me, it's in my DNA that out. That's how I was brought up. My mother was a rageaholic. And so all those years of being home until, I mean, I left when I was 18, but it's in my DNA. So if I don't continue to practice, then I could go back to that old way. So thanks.
Thank you, Lori. Anyone else want to share before we move on?
I noticed from being home that the schools, Broward schools, have been incorporating a lot of these practices with the children at home. You know, they brought like the counselor into the Microsoft Teams, and they've done like breathing exercises with the kids and asked them, how are you feeling today? You know, to, you know, name, you know, to say exactly how they're feeling. It's okay how you're feeling. If you're feeling sad, it's okay. If you're feeling mad, like they've been kind of like incorporating mindfulness, and they usually do it in the morning with the kids.
Yeah.
Before they start school. They've been trying to do that more and more. I don't, you know, now that I'm home, I actually like see it and hear it.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. So Broward, I've been involved with the Superintendent's Mindfulness Initiative since 2017. It's been a long journey to get to this place, and we're very, very, very blessed in Broward County. And, you know, and folks that are on maybe from different places, I want to, you know, I don't want to focus too much on this. But yeah, the superintendent is a very strong supporter of this work and understands the benefits for our children and for families, both for their own well-being, but also because it really supports academic success. And that's part of what we're learning here in terms of the brain sciences is that if we're not in a state of being aware and being present and being able to self-regulate, which is what the hand model of the brain was essentially describing, being able to self-regulate, how are we going to be ready to learn? And so this idea that the whole child, education is about educating the whole child is pretty much the premise. And so the Superintendent's Mindfulness Initiative includes a lot of work that's been happening behind the scenes, training. So my organization, we train the adults and help with the implementation. And so the 10 minutes of mindfulness daily is now a district-wide practice that is being implemented this year. And it took a long time to get here, not through lack of will. It's just it's a lot. It's a lot to shift the culture of a whole district. So there are other projects that are happening alongside ours that are part of this collaborative under the superintendent's initiative. That, you know, I don't want to speak for others, but I am involved in one other, which is with the Center for Mind-Body Medicine, which is more of a trauma-informed mind-body skills protocol that is district-wide and also county-wide. And so the intention is to promote this work in building resilience and in providing tools so that all individuals, adults and children, can have access to that. So yes, and so now it makes me really happy to hear a parent say, oh, I hear you guys doing, because we did it all summer, including me. I led some live sessions. So really, really happy to see you all finding out more about this. And there is a parent link, which I will share with you if I get my hands on it before the end of the session. If not, I'll share it. We have a Facebook page, The Mindful Parent. If you're on Facebook at all and you want to join, that'll be a space where after the series ends, we'll continue to share resources and you can engage there. So we'll share it somehow with you. So I just want to put my slides back up and we'll just, you know, bring us towards the end of our session. So this is an idea that we're gonna explore, this idea of our children awakening us. Because I think we walk around maybe thinking that we're helping them to be, and we are, right? But kind of beginning to plant the seed. So I'm not going to say too much about this today, but I kind of want to plant the seed. Ask yourself, how is my child waking me up in this moment? In this moment, when my child is bugging me about a TikTok video that seems, irrelevant and unimportant, how is my child waking me up in this moment? And that'll change from moment to moment. So just begin to let that seed kind of settle and see what you find. Just let it be an exploration. And in the next 2 sessions, we'll talk a little bit more about it. So I want to do a short practice again. And I hope that you're able to engage fully. This is actually the image of a book by John Kabat-Zinn called Coming to Our Senses. Fantastic book to learn about mindfulness. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Yes, Anna. They're making me more present, she says. So go ahead and find a comfortable position. You could give yourself a nice stretch if you've been sitting for a while. Just wake up those bones and muscles a little bit. I like to do shoulder shrugs. And being more aware to teaching moments. Yes, thank you, Mikhail. So let's breathe together. Let's come to our senses, figuratively and literally. So if you'd like to, you can close your eyes or you can lower your gaze. This is a practice that you can build into your daily practice routine. The brushing your teeth practice of mindfulness. And so just coming to rest and trusting that all of the information and the nuggets and the desires to remember and to be better, all of that's in here, and we don't really need to focus on it right now because it's in here. And trusting that in the moment when the need arises, that this information will come up, it'll bubble up, and we'll remember. So for now, just noticing the body sitting or standing, feeling the weight and pressure of your feet wherever they're grounded. Noticing the posture of your body. Becoming aware of the breath wherever you feel it the most. And without trying to change it or fix it, just noticing this breath now, feeling the physical sensation of the breath, maybe as it enters the nose, or sensation in the chest or the belly. And if your mind wanders, this is normal. Being curious and open and non-judgmental to whatever shows up. And just coming back to the breath. And now with this awareness of the breath, Just taking a moment to scan the body from head to toe or from toe to head, whichever direction you want to move in. So today, you can follow my guidance or you can do whatever feels right to you. Just noticing the interior of the body. So scanning from the head, sensations in the face, the neck, shoulders. And just noticing the sensations that are here without judging them, without wanting them to change right away, just being aware, building this body awareness. And just allowing your attention to travel down your arms to your fingertips, breathing in and noticing, breathing out and letting your attention move from your arms to the torso, front and back, starting at the top of the chest and the upper back, aware of the rhythmic movement of the breath, the heart beating in the chest, sensation in the muscles in your back. Breathing in, becoming aware of the abdomen, the belly, the mid and lower back, spinal column, muscles, organs, lower part of the pelvis. Breathing out whenever you're ready, letting go. Breathing in, becoming aware of your legs, thighs, knees, sensing into the bones and muscles. Just noticing what's here. And on the next in-breath, becoming aware of the lower legs and the feet. All the way to the bottom of the feet, feeling the sensation as the feet make contact with whatever surface it's resting on. And now, with this next breath, expanding to be aware of the whole body again. And just noticing the edges of the body. There might be parts that are feeling pleasant, some parts that are feeling unpleasant, some parts that are neutral, and that's okay. Just taking a moment to appreciate this body that has carried you for an entire lifetime, as imperfect as it is. Body stores stress, trauma. It also stores the goodness that we give it. And so just really honoring your body as your instrument today. And as we bring this practice to a close, again, just enter your heart space and be aware of what naturally arises. Maybe there's a word or a phrase or a feeling, an intention, and if you could share that as you transition out at your own pace, share it in the chat. So continuing to share whatever showed up for you, and maybe some of what was shared doesn't resonate with you, and that's okay. Just make this your own exploration. Don't take my word for it. Go home and practice, or you're home already, but just practice over the week and see what works and see how it works for you. Because this is a practice and it's meant to be made your own. These are all invitations of ways to practice, but you might discover your own way as well. So for a home practice, these are some invitations for you to practice 3 to 5 minutes a day, or 1 to 5 minutes, whatever time you have, something a little bit every day. Invite your children, but don't force them. So don't try to convert your children just yet. I certainly have been practicing for over 30 years and I don't force mine, even though I've taught them everything I know. It's up to them. But just invite them, and if they come, they come, and if not, it's fine. The most important thing is that they see you doing it. They see you doing it, I guarantee you, when they need it, they'll know because they've seen you doing it. Look for opportunities to be awakened by your children. Notice both pleasant and unpleasant experiences and be aware of how they feel in your body. So I've added the pleasant. We focused on unpleasant today. So notice the pleasant too. Notice how that feels, what kind of thoughts and emotions come up with that. And then use the S.T.O.P or another map, another mindful awareness practice when you're triggered. So name it to tame it is another one we talked about today. Next week, we have session 3. It's about mindful communication. Part 4 is about balancing love and discipline, where we talk about conscious discipline and really setting boundaries from a place of love. Here's my contact info. Again, I will share this in the chat if you want to pull it from there. And the final thing that I have is if there's anything else that you need from me, just email me and I will provide. And so here are some book recommendations where you'll find some similar ideas. Dan Siegel is the person who was in the video, The Whole Brain Child. He also has a book for teenagers called Brainstorm, The Conscious Parent, Mindful Parenting by Mila and John Kabat-Zinn, and Mindful Discipline by Shauna Shapiro. I am doing a Facebook Live on mindful parenting tomorrow. So if you go to my Facebook page, you'll get the update on that. It's tomorrow at 4 o'clock. And then again, we'll see each other next week. So if you go to facebook.com, I also do a Facebook Live practice every Saturday morning. It's a community practice. You can bring your kids. And we do a practice together, and it usually lasts about 30 minutes, and it stays on my page. So if you miss it, you can watch it afterwards. And we typically just talk about a theme that's in the air, you know, and then we do a practice around that theme. So thank you all so much. Be safe and be well, and I will see you next week.